Before I tell you how everything unraveled, you need to know this. There's nothing more painful than giving everything you have and still being told it's not enough. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people you raised, the people who once held your hand as children and now barely look you in the eye. I was just trying to help, and I lost everything in the process. Stick with me to the end, and you'll see why walking away was the best thing I ever did. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. It was early March in Ohio, still cold enough to see your breath in the morning, but not cold enough to stay inside all day. I remember that because I was in the garden, deadheading the last of the frostbitten mums, when the phone rang. It was Brian. His voice was soft, almost too careful. "Hey, Mom, how are you doing?" I hadn't heard from him in over 3 weeks. Not unusual. Since his marriage to Tiffany, our calls had become less frequent, shorter, polite, but distant. I told him I was fine, that I had been keeping busy with the yard and sorting through some of Harold's old things. That was a lie. I hadn't touched Harold's closet since the funeral. Just the smell of his old jackets would bring me to my knees. But Brian didn't need to know that. "You've been alone for a while now," he said. I don't like the idea of you rattling around that big old house by yourself." I laughed a little, nervously. "I've managed. It's quiet, but it's home." Then came the pause, that hesitation in his tone, the kind that tells you what comes next has already been rehearsed. "I was talking with Tiffany and, well, we think maybe you should come live with us for a while." My heart skipped. "Live with you?" "Yeah, I mean, it'd be good for the kids. They miss you. And we've got that spare room, you know? You wouldn't be in the way." I didn't answer right away. Something about it felt off, not bad, just unexpected. The last time I visited, Tiffany barely spoke 2 sentences to me. She was always busy, always somewhere else, always glued to her phone. And Brian, he looked tired even back then, thinner than usual, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in days. But the idea of being closer to my grandchildren stirred something in me. Maybe I was being silly. Maybe I had let my loneliness speak louder than my judgment. "I'll think about it," I told him. I sat with the thought for a full week. I walked through my empty house, past the family photos gathering dust, the old armchair Harold used to nap in, the teacups I hadn't used in months. I thought about the nights where I made dinner for one and left the TV on just to hear another voice in the room. And then I made the decision. I packed a suitcase. Not everything, just enough for a long stay. I left my house the way I found it. Quiet, a little sad, but still standing. I drove down to Brian's place, 2 towns over, with a heavy heart and cautious hope. When I pulled up, no one came out to greet me. Tiffany opened the door after I knocked twice. She didn't smile. "You're early," she said, stepping aside. The house smelled like takeout and diapers. Toys scattered the floor. The TV was blaring some cartoon I didn't recognize. Brian came down the stairs with the baby on his hip and hugged me quickly. Too quickly. The boys barely looked up. He pointed to the guest room. "We cleared it out for you. It's not perfect, but it's something." I stepped inside. It wasn't cleared out. There were boxes everywhere, a broken lamp in the corner, and an air mattress instead of a bed. No closet space, no place for my things. I smiled anyway. "It'll do," I said softly. I spent the first night lying on that air mattress, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of a house I didn't belong to. I told myself this was temporary, that I was needed, that this was what family did for each other. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had walked into something that had nothing to do with me being alone, and everything to do with them needing something from me. I didn't know it yet, but I had just stepped into a slow, quiet kind of betrayal, the kind that doesn't break you all at once. It chips away, day by day, until there's nothing left to give. The days that followed were filled with small silences and subtle dismissals. I tried to be helpful, offered to cook, to clean, to watch the boys while Tiffany scrolled endlessly on her phone or disappeared upstairs for hours. But nothing I did seemed to land right. Tiffany barely looked at me, and when she did, her expression hovered somewhere between forced politeness and quiet irritation. Brian was always busy, either working late, pacing the kitchen on tense phone calls, or retreating into the garage with a beer in hand. I asked him once if everything was okay, and he gave me a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're just stretched thin, Mom. You know how it is. 2 kids, bills, work. It's a lot." I nodded. I did know how it was. I raised him through tougher years than this, with far less, But I didn't say that. I just kept smiling, kept offering to help in whatever way I could. One morning, Tiffany stopped me in the hallway. "Hey, do you mind not using the washer during the day? The electric bill's been really high." I blinked. Of course, I didn't realize. I only did one load. "It's fine," she cut in, walking away before I could finish. Another time, she sighed audibly when I left the bathroom light on for too long. Then it was the heating, then the water. Every gesture I made, folding the kids' clothes, sweeping the floor, even buying groceries, seemed to be met with quiet judgment. And then came the bills. Brian brought it up like it was casual, over dinner, with the boys half asleep at the table. "I know it's a little awkward," he said, avoiding my eyes, "but things are tight right now. If you could maybe help with the hypotheca, just until we get caught up, I'd really appreciate it." I looked at him, stunned. "Of course," I said, almost automatically. "Just tell me what you need." I dipped into my savings that same week, transferred enough to cover half the monthly payment, thinking it would be a one-time thing. But the next month, he asked again. And the next. It became expected, not requested. I didn't protest. I wanted to help. I told myself that's what mothers do. But deep down, I began to feel like a line had been crossed, not by the request itself, but by the coldness with which it was received. I began to see things I hadn't noticed before. Brian's phone buzzing late into the night, his quick switch to another tab when I passed behind him at the kitchen counter. Tiffany's shopping bags from stores I knew weren't cheap, despite her constant complaints about money. And always, the tension that seemed to hang in the air like humidity, heavy, invisible, suffocating. One evening, I made a roast, the kind Brian used to love when he was little. I set the table, even folded napkins like I used to at home. I thought, maybe this would be a way to connect, to soften the edges. But Tiffany didn't come down until after we had eaten. She glanced at the empty plate I had saved her, looked at me and said, "Next time, just ask. I don't really eat red meat." She didn't touch the food, just grabbed a protein bar from the pantry and went back upstairs. I sat at the table long after everyone had left, staring at the untouched roast, listening to the dishwasher hum in the background. I wasn't wanted here. I was useful. A wallet, a babysitter, a maid. And yet, I stayed. Because I loved them. Because I still thought I could make it work. But the walls were already cracking, and I hadn't yet realized how little I was truly seen. The moment that would shatter everything was just around the corner, and it would come from the mouth of the one person who had always made me feel invisible. It happened on a Thursday. The boys were cranky that day. Too much screen time, too little fresh air. Tiffany had barely emerged from the bedroom, and Brian had been glued to his laptop in the kitchen since early morning. I spent most of the day calming tantrums, cleaning spilled juice, and folding laundry that wasn't mine. By dinner, I was exhausted. I made chicken casserole, the kind that feeds a family and stretches the leftovers. I set the table like always, called everyone down, and tried to pretend like this was normal, that I belonged. Tiffany sat across from me, scrolling through her phone between bites. Brian chewed in silence, his eyes fixed on the screen of his laptop propped beside his plate. The kids bickered, poked at their food, and eventually got up before finishing. Trying to make conversation, I said gently, "You know, if we all sat together more often for meals, maybe the boys would eat better." Tiffany didn't look up. Brian cleared his throat. "We're just a little overwhelmed, Mom." That was when Tiffany raised her head. Her voice was flat but laced with something sharp beneath the surface. "You're always making little comments, Maggie, like we don't know how to run our own house." I blinked. "I didn't mean it like that. She cut me off, setting her fork down with a loud clink. "You do a lot of talking for someone who doesn't actually contribute enough to be making suggestions." The words landed like a slap. The air seemed to leave the room. Brian didn't say anything. He just looked down at his plate. I stared at them both, frozen. My hands trembled under the table. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out, because in that moment, I realized something I had been denying for weeks. I wasn't part of this family. I was a burden dressed up as a helper, a placeholder until they could breathe again, someone to use, not someone to honor. I got up without finishing my meal, took my plate to the sink, rinsed it in silence. My heart thudded in my chest as I walked down the hallway into the makeshift room they had cleared for me. I sat on the edge of the air mattress and stared at the floor for a long time. That night, I didn't sleep. I thought of all the years I held Brian through storms of emotion, of the nights I went hungry to feed him, of the sacrifices I made without ever being asked. And now, I was not contributing enough. After paying half their hypotheca, cooking their meals, cleaning their house, loving their children, I still wasn't enough. By morning, something inside me had shifted. The silence at breakfast was thick. Tiffany avoided my eyes. Brian acted like nothing had happened. I didn't speak. I couldn't, not without crying, and I wouldn't give them that. So I went back to the guest room, zipped up my suitcase, and began folding the few clothes I had taken from my real home, the one I should have never left. Then I saw it, outside the bedroom door, propped against the hallway wall, my suitcase, already packed, already waiting, as if they knew, as if this had been decided for me the moment Tiffany spoke those words. A part of me cracked, but another part, the deeper part, hardened. I was done. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to lose more than just their housekeeper, their unpaid nanny, their emergency fund. They were about to lose the one person who would have done anything to protect them. And I would make sure they felt every inch of that loss. I didn't say goodbye. I wanted to the boys at least, but I couldn't bring myself to wake them. They were innocent in all of this. They didn't choose to treat me like I was disposable. But I knew if I saw their sleepy eyes and little hands reaching for one more hug, I wouldn't be able to leave. So I didn't. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Just one line, written in the neat cursive I learned in Catholic school. Thank you for having me. I carried my suitcase out the front door just after sunrise. No one noticed. No one stopped me. Brian didn't come down the stairs. Tiffany didn't peek from the bedroom. The silence of that house confirmed everything I already knew. As I drove away, the road ahead blurred through tears I tried not to shed, not because I regretted leaving, but because I regretted ever thinking I belonged. I pulled into my own driveway just past 8. The house stood like a forgotten promise, a little sagging, a little dusty, but still mine, still waiting for me. I opened the front door and was hit with the smell of old air and time, the kind of silence that echoed. I walked room to room, touching the furniture like it might disappear under my fingers. My wedding photo with Harold was still on the fireplace mantel. Our bed was still made, the last sheets he slept on still neatly folded. My slippers were exactly where I'd left them, and suddenly I felt foolish for leaving it, for thinking I could find comfort anywhere else. Before unpacking, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my banking app. I scrolled to the automatic transfers, the ones I'd set up to cover part of Brian and Tiffany's hypotheca. I stared at them, heart pounding. Then I pressed cancel, each one. Click, click, click. And then I sat there for a long time, listening to the silence settle around me like a blanket. That afternoon I got a text from Brian. Hey, just wanted to check if you made it home okay. I didn't reply. 2 hours later, another message. I know things got weird, but maybe we could talk soon. Still, I said nothing. By nightfall, the phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. No apology, no acknowledgement of Tiffany's words, just concern that his safety net had walked out the door. I heated up a frozen meal and sat at my own table for the first time in months. I didn't eat much, but I swallowed every bite with the kind of pride I hadn't tasted in years. They thought they could dismiss me like I was an old couch too worn to be useful, but they'd made one mistake. They thought I would stay quiet. They had no idea what losing me would cost them, and I was only beginning to realize the value they'd overlooked. The next time I heard from them, it wouldn't be a casual check-in. It would be a desperate cry for help. The first week back home felt like waking up from a long, aching dream. I cleaned every room, top to bottom, not because it needed it, but because I needed it. I needed to reclaim the space, to remind myself that I existed outside of their expectations, that I had a life before I became their solution. But even with the windows open and the sun warming the hardwood floors, the silence was heavy. I missed the boys, their laughter, their tiny hands tugging at my sleeve. I missed their messy questions and unexpected hugs. I didn't miss Tiffany's glares or Brian's passivity, but the kids, that hurt. A few days later, I bought them a gift. I know what you're thinking. They didn't deserve it. Maybe not, but the boys did. They had no idea what their parents had done, no idea what had been said behind closed doors or what it felt like to be discarded by your own son. So I ordered 2 new iPads, preloaded them with educational games and drawing apps, and added a soft leather case to each, navy blue for Jake, forest green for Liam. I wrapped them carefully, wrote a handwritten note, and paid extra for overnight delivery. The note said, "Even when I'm far away, I'm always right here. Love." Grandma! No response came from Brian. No text, no thank you. Nothing from Tiffany, of course, but I knew they received the packages. I had tracking confirmation. A week later, I saw the boys on Tiffany's Instagram story. They were playing on the iPads, grinning ear to ear. Tiffany hadn't tagged me, hadn't mentioned me, but I saw the smiles. That was enough for now. Then came the silence again. I busied myself with puzzles and books and long walks around the block. I didn't cry, not out loud, but every time I passed the hallway where Harold's coat still hung, I felt my throat tighten. And then one night, out of nowhere, I woke up with a strange pit in my stomach. Something told me to check my finances. I hadn't thought much about it since canceling the transfers, but I logged into my bank anyway, and found nothing out of the ordinary. What did catch my eye, though, was an email alert from 2 months prior. One I hadn't opened in the chaos of moving. It was from my bank. A notification of a large withdrawal Brian had made, money that hadn't gone to the hypotheca. My heart raced. I dug deeper, pulled old statements. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew something was wrong. The numbers didn't add up. There were repeated charges for a company I didn't recognize, something with a vague name. I Googled it. It was a gambling site. I stared at the screen, stunned. Over a dozen charges, spread out over weeks, hundreds of dollars each time, sometimes days apart, all while I was under their roof, all while he was telling me how tight things were, while he let his wife belittle me, while I paid his bills. It hit me like a punch to the gut. He didn't just use me, he lied to me, not just by omission, but with full knowledge that he was funneling my money into a hole he couldn't crawl out of. And worse, he didn't even ask for help. He hid it, buried it under fake politeness and long silences. That night, I sat in the living room, lights off, the blue glow of the computer screen casting shadows on the walls. I thought of every time I believed I was helping him, supporting him, saving him, and realized he was letting me drown myself to keep his head above water. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just sat there. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never felt toward my own child. Resentment, not the sharp kind, but the slow, acidic kind that eats at your ribs. The kind that comes from knowing your love was weaponized. And I knew in that moment, nothing would ever be the same between us again. The next morning, I woke up changed. I didn't feel like myself, not the version of me that used to excuse, to soften, to look the other way. I felt sharper, colder, like something inside had finally snapped back into alignment after years of being dislocated. I didn't text Brian. I didn't confront him. What was the point? He'd just deny it, minimize it, blame stress or Tiffany or life. I knew how that dance went. I'd watched Harold do it with his own secrets more times than I care to count. But this wasn't about Harold. This was about me. I opened a new savings account that day. One Brian couldn't touch, transferred everything I had left, closed the old one, canceled the card I'd once handed to him just in case, deleted every automatic payment that had his name attached to it. Then I changed the locks on my front door. It was dramatic. I knew that, but it felt right. Like a ritual, sealing the space between the woman I used to be and the woman I was becoming. The calls started a week later. First, it was just Brian, casual check-ins. Just wanted to say hi. Miss the boys? But I heard the edge in his voice, the tension. He wasn't just calling to chat. Then the questions came. Hey, did the bank call you? Something weird happened with my account. I think there's been a mistake with the hypotheca. Did you maybe forget to... I didn't answer. Let every call go to voicemail. The texts started stacking up like unpaid bills. Tiffany says you changed your number? Are you okay? You've been acting strange. Can we just talk? Please. No, we couldn't. I watched from a distance as the cracks in their perfect little house deepened. Tiffany started posting fewer photos. When she did, her smile looked tired, forced. The kids' clothes looked older, the backgrounds more cluttered. The tone changed. I could tell. The money was drying up. Then came the real sign, the one that hit me like a vindication I didn't even know I wanted. A letter from the bank, addressed to me by mistake, or maybe on purpose, since I'd once co-signed something I barely understood. Pre-foreclosure notice. I stared at the word delinquent like it was written in fire. That same night, Brian called again. I didn't answer. He texted instead. I know you're upset, but Mom, we need help, just this once. Please. No apology, no acknowledgement of the gambling, the lies, the betrayal, just desperation. And I'll admit it, a part of me ached to fix it, to make everything right, to be the mother who swoops in, who saves the day, who earns back her worth through sacrifice. But that part of me was dying, starved by years of one-sided giving. Instead, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not to Brian, not to Tiffany, to myself. I listed everything I'd given, every bill I'd paid, every favor, every ride, every meal, every sacrifice. Then, beneath it, I wrote, and still, it wasn't enough. That sentence stared back at me like a verdict. It was the truth, and finally, I was done trying to rewrite it. They were about to learn what life looked like without me, and I was about to learn what life looked like when I chose me first. I disappeared. Not physically. I was still in my home, still walking the same streets, still buying my groceries at the same corner store. But emotionally, digitally, spiritually, I vanished. I shut down Facebook, blocked Brian's number, changed my email, turned off notifications for everything. I needed silence, not the heavy, painful kind I'd lived with since Harold died, but a new kind, clean silence, the kind that makes space for something better. I started small. A walk every morning, just 20 minutes through my neighborhood, past the same mailboxes and barking dogs and hedges I'd seen 1,000 times before. But now, with different eyes, the air felt colder, crisper, like it had more truth in it, like it could cut through denial. Then I signed up for therapy. Not because I was broken, though maybe I was, but because I needed someone to talk to who wouldn't try to manipulate me, guilt me, or demand anything from me. I cried through the first 3 sessions. I hadn't cried in front of another human being in years. I told her everything. About Harold's quiet selfishness, about Brian's distance, about Tiffany's disdain, about the time I overheard Tiffany mocking my clothes to a friend on speakerphone, about the meals they didn't thank me for, about the way Brian used to call me Mama when he needed something, and Ma when he didn't want to talk, about how I'd paid for his childhood, his college, his first car, his wedding suit, and now his hypotheca, unknowingly fueling his addiction while being told I wasn't enough. My therapist didn't say much, but she looked at me, really looked, and somehow, that was everything. I pulled my old sewing machine out of the attic next. I hadn't touched it since before Harold got sick, back when I used to make costumes for school plays, Halloween outfits for Brian, pillows for the church bazaar. I dusted it off, oiled the joints, and started stitching again. At first, it was just mending. Old towels, worn shirts. But soon, I was making tote bags, aprons, custom baby blankets. I set up an online store. Nothing big, nothing flashy, just mine. And people bought them. Strangers sent me thank you messages, asked for more, paid full price, told me my stitching reminded them of their own grandmothers. For the first time in years, I was valued. Not as a mother, not as a helper, not as a wallet, but as me. One afternoon I opened a new journal. The pages were crisp, untouched. I wrote across the first line in thick, black ink. I am not a burden. I am not invisible. I am not disposable. And beneath that, I am a woman who deserves peace. It became my mantra. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I didn't need to, because slowly, I was becoming someone I hadn't been in a very long time. Not just someone who survived, but someone who thrived. And meanwhile, the world I'd left behind was starting to crack. I didn't hear from Brian for over 3 weeks. Not a word, no texts, no calls, no last-ditch apologies. The silence was strange at first, eerie even, but not painful, just quiet, like the ringing in your ears after a fire alarm stops. You don't notice how loud it was until it's gone. But then, slowly, signs of their unraveling began to surface, subtle, like smoke seeping under a closed door. Tiffany's Instagram changed. She used to post curated photos of the boys in matching outfits, latte art, new home decor, all bright filters and toothy smiles. Suddenly there were fewer pictures, the captions got shorter, the smiles disappeared, and then, nothing. I checked once a week just to see, call it curiosity, call it concern. I told myself it wasn't spite. I just needed to know how far the echo of my absence had carried. One afternoon, While scrolling through the local neighborhood app, I saw a listing. Gently used sectional sofa. Must pick up. Urgent. It was their couch. I recognized the throw pillows. A week later, brand name handbags for sale. DM for details. Then came the car. Tiffany's SUV, the one she refused to let anyone else drive, was gone from the driveway in the background of a photo someone else had posted. In its place, a dented old sedan. Their image was fading, the polish stripped away. The next time I went into town, I saw Brian at the grocery store, alone. He didn't see me, or maybe he pretended not to. He was wearing the same hoodie I'd sewn a patch onto 3 winters ago. His cart had generic cereal, frozen pizza, baby wipes, no steaks, no wine, no organic anything. He looked tired, pale, hollow. I watched him from behind a display of canned soup, and for one fragile second, something in me wanted to walk up to him, say hello, ask how the boys were, offer to help. But then I remembered Tiffany's voice, crisp and cutting. You don't contribute enough to be making suggestions. So I let him pass. That night, I cooked myself a real meal, not frozen, not microwaved. I lit a candle, poured a glass of wine, set the table with the good plates, just for me. The house was warm, safe, peaceful, and then, on Christmas Eve, a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the window, no car in the driveway. A delivery box sat on my porch, large, wrapped in brown paper. Inside were 2 smaller packages, one addressed to Grandma, the other to Mimi, the nickname Liam had started calling me when he was still learning to speak. My breath caught. Inside, the same iPads I had sent them weeks ago, carefully wrapped again. But now they had been decorated. Stickers, glitter. One of them had a note written in big childish handwriting. We miss you. Merry Christmas. Come back soon. I sat on the floor and wept, not for Brian, not for Tiffany, for the children, for what they were caught in, for what they didn't understand. I wanted to run to them, hold them, tell them none of this was their fault. But instead, I walked to the hallway closet, pulled out 2 new jackets I had bought on clearance and never mailed, and began to pack another box. I filled it with love disguised as essentials, gloves, books, warm socks, small toys, and another note. A grandma's love doesn't need permission. It's always yours. I dropped it at the post office the next morning. No return address, no expectation, just love with boundaries, because they had to learn. I wouldn't disappear, but I also wouldn't be their foundation anymore. They would have to rebuild it themselves. Christmas came and went in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Quiet, still, mine. I decorated the tree alone, hung Harold's favorite ornament near the top, and lit a single candle by his photo on the mantel. I didn't cook a feast, just baked my mother's cinnamon bread, the one she used to make on snowy mornings, and let the scent fill the house. There was no shouting, no chaos, no scrambling to impress guests who didn't care. There was only peace. But even peace has its shadows. I missed the boys, missed the sound of their laughter bouncing off the walls, the way Jake would curl into me on the couch like a cat, the way Liam would try to say words too big for his mouth. I wondered what kind of Christmas they were having. The answer came a few days later, wrapped in Instagram silence and one text from Brian. Hope you had a good holiday, Mom. No, we missed you. No, the boys asked about you. Just that one cold sentence. But I already knew what kind of holiday they'd had. You could see it in the absences. No Christmas photos, no matching pajamas, no decorated tree. And then I saw it, a local classifieds post on the day after Christmas. Urgent, looking for part-time babysitting. Flexible hours, must be reliable. Background check required. The poster was Tiffany. My heart squeezed and swelled at the same time. They needed help, not a handout, not anymore. They needed support, structure, stability, things I had once provided like clockwork, like breath, without ever being thanked for. I could have called, I could have reached out, but I didn't. Instead, I did something else. I sent another package to the boys, this one carefully thought out. Inside, warm winter coats, handmade scarves, new books, and small wooden toys, but also something extra. 2 framed photos, one of me with Jake, another with Liam, taken the last time we had made cookies together. The smiles were real in those, the joy was whole, and then one final envelope, addressed to Brian and Tiffany. Inside, a card. On the front, a watercolor painting of a tree losing its leaves. On the inside, handwritten in pen, Love isn't alone, respect isn't optional, and help isn't forever. No signature, no threats, just the truth. Days passed, then a week. Then, one afternoon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a box on my porch. No return label. Inside, wrapped in brown paper and Scotch tape, the 2 photo frames. Returned. But the coats and books were gone. And on the back of the card I had sent, a new line had been added in Brian's handwriting. "We understand. We'll figure it out." I stood there for a long time, holding the card, heart thudding. He was starting to get it. Not fully. Not yet. But the cracks were turning into reflection. The next step would be painful. For him, for her, for the boys. But I wouldn't interfere. Sometimes love means stepping back far enough for them to fall, so they finally learn how to stand. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was folding laundry, the humdrum kind of chore that fills silence without drawing attention to itself. My phone buzzed across the counter. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said to. Brian's voice was hoarse, like he hadn't slept. "Mom," he said, "please, I need to see you." There was no bitterness in his tone, no guilt-tripping, just something I hadn't heard in years. Honesty. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just told him I'd be home the next day if he wanted to stop by. At p.m., I heard the sound of tires on my gravel drive. I peeked out the window and saw his car. Not the old SUV, but a compact sedan that looked borrowed or bought cheap. He walked up the steps slowly, like his body was heavier than it used to be. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight. His eyes were sunken, his cheeks pale. The confident slouch he always wore, the one he picked up sometime after marrying Tiffany, was gone. In its place was something raw, stripped. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, just for a second, then stepped aside. He sat on the edge of the couch like it might reject him, held his hands in his lap, wringing them. "I messed up," he said. "You don't need to say it. I already know." I stayed silent. He looked around my house like he was seeing it for the first time. The worn armchair, the stack of books on the coffee table, the candle still burning on the mantel. "I didn't realize how peaceful it was here," he said quietly. Still, I didn't speak. And then, he broke. "I'm in trouble, Mom," he whispered. I think I'm addicted to online betting. I tried to stop. I swear I did. But every time I felt overwhelmed, I'd pick up the phone. And Tiffany, she doesn't understand. She just wants the money back. That's all she ever talks about." He paused, choked on his words. "I ruined everything. The house is behind on payments. The kids ask why there's no heat some nights. Tiffany's talking about moving back to her mother's. I don't know what to do." And then came the question I'd been dreading, the one I knew was coming. "Can you help us? Just this once. We just need a little push. I swear I'll pay you back." I looked at him, really looked. This was my child, my baby, the boy I once rocked through fever and fear, now drowning in choices I couldn't make for him. And yet, I stood slowly, walked to the front door, opened it, and said, softly, but firmly, "Not today." He froze, blinking. "I'm not saying never," I said, "but not today. Not until you understand what it cost me to sit in this room alone while you let someone else humiliate me in yours." He tried to speak, but I raised a hand. Raised. "I loved you through every stage of your life. I sacrificed without asking. I gave until I disappeared, and you watched it happen. You let it happen. So now, you'll have to live in the silence you created." A tear slipped down his cheek. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and for the first time in a long time, I believed him. But it wasn't enough. He left 10 minutes later, didn't slam the door, didn't stomp, just walked to the car like a man learning how to carry the weight of his own mistakes. That night, I cried, but not for him. I cried for the mother I used to be, the one who thought love meant endless forgiveness. That woman was gone, and in her place stood someone new, someone ready to set the terms. 3 weeks passed, no calls, no texts, just silence. But this time, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space, a quiet between storms, a space for him to sit with himself, and for me to decide what I needed. Then one morning, just as I was about to head to the post office, there was a knock. I opened the door, and there he was, Brian, hair longer, beard unkempt. But his eyes, they were different, not desperate, not manipulative, just tired, honest. "Can I come in?" he asked. I nodded. He sat on the couch again, but not like a stranger. This time, like a man asking for the floor beneath him. I started going to meetings, he said. Gamblers Anonymous, every Tuesday and Saturday. I said nothing, just listened. I sold the SUV, canceled the credit cards, got a job doing deliveries at night. It's not much, but it's something. I'm trying, Mom. I really am. I waited. I knew there was more. I'm scared, he said. We're behind 2 months on the hypotheca. Tiffany, she's angry all the time. The boys hear everything. I don't want to lose them. He looked up at me raw. I need help, but this time I'm not just asking for money. I need structure. I need you to teach me how to be responsible, how to stop depending on everyone else. I swallowed hard. This was the moment, the crossroads. I stood, went into the kitchen, and returned with a folder. Inside, a payment agreement, a budget plan, a printed list of rehab clinics, and a separation checklist. He opened it slowly. His eyes widened. What's this? My terms, I said. I'll pay the past due amount on the hypotheca, just enough to keep the house from being taken. One time. That's it. From here on, you're in control of your money. I'll help guide you if you show up. But if you miss one therapy session, one group meeting, if I catch one charge on your account from a betting site, I won't, he cut in. I didn't flinch. If you want this help, I said, you also separate your finances from Tiffany. Completely. No joint accounts, no shared cards. You handle your side. She handles hers. He hesitated. That's not going to go over well, he muttered. That's your call, I said. But if you stay tangled in her chaos, I'm out. His eyes darted back to the folder, the agreement, the checklist. His hands trembled. And then he nodded. Okay. And just like that, I saw something shift. Not forgiveness, not resolution, but accountability. We shook hands. He signed the papers. We set weekly check-ins. My rules, my timing. And then he stood to leave. At the door, he turned to me. I never realized how much I leaned on you until you stepped away. I smiled faintly. That's the thing about leaning, I said. It works until the person holding you up finally steps aside. He left in silence. I locked the door behind him, and for the first time in years, I felt like I'd won something, not by saving someone else, but by saving myself. One chapter left, and they still had one final lesson to learn. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, not yet, but quieter. The air was still thick with tension, but there was a sense of anticipation, the kind you feel right before a storm breaks. You can sense the pressure, the weight of something big about to change. Brian kept his word mostly. He showed up for meetings. He stuck to his budget plan. Slowly, painstakingly, he started to untangle himself from the mess he'd made. But it wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is. I could see the strain in his eyes, the way his hands still trembled when he checked his bank account. He wanted to trust again, but trust was a currency he'd spent, and it wasn't coming back easily. Tiffany, on the other hand, was not the same woman. She still posted her perfect pictures on social media, but the cracks were there. I could see it in her eyes when she came to drop off the boys. The tension between them was palpable. Every little thing set her off. The way he folded the laundry wrong, the way he left his shoes in the hallway. She would snap at him, then retreat to her phone like she could block him out. But the most telling moment came when Brian finally told her about his decision to separate their finances. He didn't do it in a dramatic way like you see in movies. No shouting. No fights, just a quiet, tired conversation at the kitchen table. I can't do this anymore, Tiff, he said, voice thick with something I couldn't quite place. I can't keep depending on you to solve everything. I have to do it myself. For me. For the kids. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then, finally, she spoke in a tone I'd never heard her use before. It wasn't harsh or cruel. It was small. You're right, she said softly. I've been waiting for you to fix it all. I thought we could just keep going, but I don't know if I can do it anymore either. They didn't get a divorce then. But there was something in the way he looked at her, not with resentment, but with acceptance. He had done what I had asked. He had made the choice to stand on his own feet, and it was hard, but it was happening. Slowly. And I didn't offer my help. I didn't offer a shoulder. I didn't step in. I let them figure it out. A week later, I received a call from Brian. It was late. Around p.m., I'd just finished a project for my little side business and was cleaning up the kitchen when my phone rang. It wasn't the text I had expected. It wasn't a desperate request. It was just him. Mom, I've been thinking, I want to move out. I paused, setting the dish down in the sink. Are you sure? Yeah, he said, his voice steady. It's time. I can't keep living under this roof like I'm just a guest. I need my own place. I need to be able to take care of my kids the right way. It's going to be hard, but I can do it. I want to do it. I took a deep breath. You're right, I said, my voice tight but calm. You can do it. I know you can. I didn't tell him what I was thinking, that this was the moment. This was the first real step toward the future I had been waiting for. Not for me, not for them, but for him, his future, his stability. We ended the call with a promise, not to each other, but to ourselves. He was going to make it. A few days later, I saw him again. He was standing by his car outside a small duplex. He looked different, not just physically, though he'd gained weight and had cleaned up a little, but something else had changed. There was a quiet strength in him. He had done what I never thought he could. He didn't ask for help this time. Instead, he held out the keys to his new place, not in a boastful way, not like a man who had won, but like a man who had earned it. Mom, he said, his voice steady and clear, I did it. I paid for this place with my own money, and I'll pay the bills. I'll be a father, a husband, and a son. I'll do it my way. No more excuses. I nodded. I'm proud of you, I said, my voice breaking, though I wasn't sure why. I wouldn't have done it without you, he admitted, his voice thick with gratitude. But you didn't just give me the money. You gave me the space to find myself again. And that was enough. I hugged him tightly. The warmth of it didn't come from pity or regret. It came from a place of understanding. We had both fought this battle for so long, side by side, but never really together. Now, we were both standing on our own 2 feet, and I realized in that moment that I didn't need to save him anymore. He had saved himself. I watched him drive away, the car disappearing down the street, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not just for me, but for him. For all of us. And for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.